We're aiming to shed some light on, how the mind can actually change the brain, different therapies that tap into that, and this whole big idea of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, yeah, that the brain isn't fixed. It can change.
Precisely. It's pretty revolutionary when you think about it.
Okay, so let's get into it. The book starts off with behaviorism. That was a huge deal in psychology for ages, right?
Oh, definitely. The core idea was pretty simple, really. Change behavior from the outside in, rewards for what you want, punishments for what you don't, like training a dog almost.
Right. And that led to therapies like ERP exposure and response prevention, mainly for OCD.
Yeah, ERP. It's pure behaviorism. You expose someone to their trigger, say germs, if they have contamination fears.
Like touching a doorknob or something worse.
Exactly. They even make a list, like a hierarchy of scary things. A doorknob might be a 3 out of 10, but touching, say, garbage might be a 9.
Okay.
And this is the key part, you prevent them from doing their compulsion. No hand washing.
Wow. Reading that, I gotta say, it sounds, well, pretty intense, almost kind of cruel from the outside.
It is intense, no doubt about it. You're basically asking someone to sit with massive anxiety. The idea, though, is that if you block the escape, the compulsion, the anxiety, it eventually fades. It learns it's a false alarm.
Does it work?
It can, yeah. The book mentions it's effective for some, but it also points out, it's tough, high dropout rates. And there was that UCLA study comparing it to drugs, suggesting maybe it's not the only answer.
Which kind of leads into this other perspective the book highlights, doesn't it? Moving away from just external manipulation towards the person's own mind playing a role.
Exactly. It brings up this really old idea, actually, from Adam Smith.
The Economist?
Yeah, surprisingly. He talked about the impartial and well-informed spectator, like an inner observer watching your own feelings from a bit of a distance.
Ah, okay. So like mindfulness almost, observing your thoughts without immediately reacting.
Precisely, creating that little bit of space. Instead of being in the anxiety, you're observing it. And the book argues this is crucial for more, let's say, self-directed approaches to OCD, not just passively enduring exposure.
Now, this is where it gets really wild for me anyway, the link to physics.
The collaboration with Henry Stapp, the physicist.
Yeah, suggesting that things like attention, our will, might have roots in quantum physics. Now, quantum mechanics is, well, it's famously weird.
It is. Very different from classical physics, Newton's world of predictable billiard balls. That's deterministic, everything follows set rules.
Right. If you know where everything is now, you can predict the future perfectly.
Exactly. But quantum mechanics, it's probabilistic, it talks about possibilities, wave functions, and it's sort of new kind of stuff that has both physical and potentially mental aspects. And Stapp's argument, as Schwartz presents it, is that our conscious thoughts, our choices, our volition, they aren't just side effects of brain chemistry. They can actually cause changes in the physical brain.
Mind over matter, literally.
In a way, yeah. A genuine two-way street. Not just brain causing mind, but mind influencing brain.
Which naturally opens up that huge question. What is consciousness? The book uses that alien commander analogy.
Right. Could an alien build a perfect replica of our visual system? A machine that detects light and source colors just like our brain?
But would it actually see red? Would it have that subjective feeling, the qualia?
That's the million-dollar question. It gets at the difference between just processing information, like a camera, and having an actual inner experience, knowing that you know.
And this runs right up against materialism, doesn't it? The idea that only physical stuff is real.
Absolutely. Materialism, in its strictest form, says mind, consciousness. They aren't fundamentally real things. They're just what the brain does.
Like the colorblind neuroscientist, Mary. She knows every physical fact about seeing red, but when she finally sees it, does she learn something new, that feeling?
It's a powerful thought experiment. Can you fully explain the subjective experience just by describing the physical bits and pieces? Philosophers call it the explanatory gap.
David Chalmers' term, right?
Yeah. He argues strongly against reducing consciousness just to neurons firing. There seems to be something more going on.
Okay, so bringing it back down to earth a bit, back to OCD. The book clarifies it's not just hand washing.
Oh, not at all. It covers ordering, checking, counting, hoarding, a whole range of obsessive thoughts and the compulsions people perform to try and neutralize the anxiety.
But it's a trap, right? Giving in feels better for a second, but makes the whole thing worse long term.
Exactly. The book calls it chronic poison ivy of the mind. You scratch the itch, the compulsion, and it just spreads.
So we talked about ERP, the exposure therapy. The book mentions SEDs.
Subjective units of distress. Basically, rating your anxiety level during exposure 0 to 100. The goal is to see that number come down as you resist the compulsion.
But again, the book is honest about the downsides of ERP, people dropping out because it's too scary, therapists may be misusing it. It's not a magic bullet.
Definitely not. Which is why exploring other mechanisms is so important, like that gambling study by Bichara and Damasio.
Ah, yeah, the patients with damage to the orbital frontal cortex, they knew they were making bad bets, rationally, but they didn't have that gut feeling that, uh-oh, something's wrong here signal.
Exactly. It shows how important that emotional intuitive feedback is for good decision-making. It's not all pure logic.
And that connects to those neurons, the TANs, conically active neurons.
Right, in the striatum. They seem to be involved in integrating that emotional information from the limbic system with the reasoning from the prefrontal cortex.
And they're important for habits.
Very. They help link cues with rewarded behaviors. They're like a gatekeeper for locking in habits. And the idea in cognitive behavioral therapy is, can we use conscious effort to retrain how these TANs respond? Change the automatic habit loop in OCD.
Which leads perfectly into Schwartz's own approach, the 4 steps. He developed this partly because he was a bit uncomfortable with standard ERP, right?
Yeah, he felt it could be overly distressing and maybe didn't give the person enough active control. So he came up with relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue.
And refocus seems key. When the OCD urge hits, you deliberately shift your attention somewhere else, to something constructive.
Exactly. And it takes real willpower, the book stresses that.
Yeah.
You're actively choosing to engage a different brain circuit, while that uncomfortable OCD feeling is still there.
And the neuroscience idea behind it is pretty cool. You're basically strengthening a good pathway by using it, and weakening the bad OCD pathway by not engaging it.
Build a new road. And the old one eventually gets overgrown.
Yeah.
He even used PET scans and therapy groups to show patients, look, this is the sticky circuit, the faulty transmission in your brain causing this feeling. It's not you, it's your brain circuit.
That must be empowering, to reattribute the feeling to a brain glitch.
Hugely. And the results, especially combining the 4 steps with behavior therapy, seem really promising. Corbis reported like an 80% success rate. And it's been shown to work in kids, too.
It all points towards this amazing capacity of the brain, neuroplasticity.
Yes. The brain isn't static. It's constantly changing, reorganizing based on experience. The book gives incredible examples. Martha, the musician who kept her music after brain surgery.
Or Alexandria, living a pretty normal life after having a whole brain hemisphere removed as a child.
It's mind-boggling. Especially in kids, their brains are just so much more adaptable. Neurons haven't quite decided their final job yet, as the book puts it.
And there's that cross-modal thing, too, like blind people having enhanced touch because the visual part of the brain gets repurposed.
Exactly. Unused brain real estate gets taken over by other senses. And underpinning a lot of this is Hebb's rule. Neurons that fire together wire together. That's learning, memory, skill acquisition in a nutshell.
Experience literally wires the brain. And our genes don't specify everything, right? There's a genetic shortfall.
Right. DNA provides the blueprint, but experience builds the house, fills in the details. Think of those early rat studies. Enriched cages led to thicker brain cortices, more connections.
Or how our visual system develops after birth. It needs input to wire up properly.
Yeah, even brief visual experience after congenital cataracts can kickstart the visual cortex, like waking it up. Same idea with cochlear implants for deafness.
And it's not just big changes. Even our sensory maps, how the brain represents our skin, gets refined by touch experiences. Use it or lose it, basically.
And then there's that second burst of synapse growth in adolescence, especially in the frontal lobes, the executive control center.
So teens have this window to really shape their abilities.
Seems like it. Practice skills, engage deeply in things, and you strengthen those connections. Unused ones get pruned away. It's a critical period for shaping the adult brain.
Okay, this plasticity idea is powerful. But then the book goes into the Silver Spring monkeys, which is pretty controversial territory.
It is. Edward Taub's research. The conditions were definitely problematic, and PETA got involved. But scientifically, it led to something huge.
He cut the sensory nerves in the monkey's arms, right? Yeah. Deferentiation. And they stopped using those arms.
Yes, learned in non-use. Even if the motor nerves were fine, without sensory feedback, they just didn't use the limb.
So Taub forced them to use it by restraining the good arm.
Essentially, yes. Sometimes with negative reinforcement too, which added to the controversy. But the point was, he could overcome learned non-use. The monkeys could use the limb if pushed.
And this led to therapy for humans.
Directly. Constraint-induced movement therapy, CI therapy for stroke patients. Restrain the good arm, force intensive use of the affected arm.
And it works, even long after the stroke.
Remarkably well in many cases. Lots of repetitive exercises. It took a while for the medical world to accept it, but trials proved its effectiveness. It actually reorganizes the brain map in the damaged hemisphere. Real, use-dependent cortical reorganization.
Amazing. Then there's focal hand dystonia in musicians, losing control of specific fingers.
Yeah, devastating for a performer. The book tells Laura's story, the frustration of being dismissed by doctors.
But research showed even mental practice could change the motor cortex.
Right. Pasqualeone's work and Nudo's monkey experiments showed that learning motor skills physically expanded the brain area controlling those movements. Mersenjuk found similar things in the somatosensory cortex with touch discrimination tasks. Maps change with use.
It really hammers home that use it or lose it idea for brain circuits.
Absolutely. Which also applies to hearing. The book discusses SLI, specific language impairment, and dyslexia.
The idea being a problem processing rapid sounds, phonemes.
Exactly. Maybe kids with SLI chunk sounds together,
Yeah.
missing the quick transitions that distinguish, say, ba from da. And if you mishear sounds for years, it's hard to retrain the auditory cortex.
So they developed special modified speech, fast forward,
Yeah, exaggerating those fast transitions. Initial results looked promising for kids with SLI and dyslexia, but then it got commercialized, became expensive, and the claims about truly reshaping the brain needed more independent proof. Still debated.
It seems like these mindfulness and cognitive techniques are branching out too, beyond OCD.
Definitely. The book mentions using similar ideas: awareness, modifying responses for Tourette's tics, and crucially, for preventing depression relapse.
MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy.
Right. Teasdale's work. Teaching people prone to depression to just observe their negative thoughts and feelings as passing events without judging or getting swept away.
And it helps prevent relapse.
Significantly, especially for those with multiple past episodes. And then there's that London taxi driver study.
Oh yeah. Bigger hippocampi, the spatial memory area, because they spend years memorizing the city streets. Structural change in adults.
Clear evidence of plasticity continuing throughout life.
So this all brings us back around, doesn't it, to the mind's role, maybe even grounded in quantum physics?
It does. The book circles back to Ramon Kyle, the father of neuroscience, who initially thought the adult brain was fixed, but hoped science would find ways to change it. And now we see evidence for self-directed change.
And classical physics just didn't seem to have room for mind or will having real influence. It was all predetermined.
Pretty much. But quantum physics is different. The observer isn't just passive. Observation seems to play a role in determining reality from possibilities. Think of the double-slit experiment.
Right. How does a particle know if it's being watched?
Exactly. Stapp's interpretation emphasizes the active role of the observer's conscious thought in this process. It's not just a byproduct. It's involved.
And this quantum perspective, according to Schwartz and Stapp, could support William James's idea that consciousness and attention have real causal power.
That's the argument. That choice at the quantum level isn't fully determined by prior physics, allowing a space for genuine volition, maybe analogous to karma, in Buddhist thought.
And the feeling is different, right? OCD feels like it's happening to you passively, but the 4 steps feel like active effort.
Precisely. That subjective difference suggests real mental force at play. It counters strict determinism, the idea that free will is just an illusion.
What about Libet's experiments? The readiness potential appearing before conscious awareness of deciding.
Yeah, those are complex. They raise questions, but some interpret them as showing we might have free won't, the ability to veto an action just before it happens. And PET scans do show brain activity linked to willed action in the frontal cortex.
Like deciding to imagine a sound.
Yeah.
Or those brain-computer interfaces where people move cursors just by thinking.
Powerful demonstrations of intention influencing the physical. So the big question becomes, can we harness this mental force to intentionally change circuits related to personality, habits, anything?
And attention seems to be the key mechanism here. Is attention just something that happens to us, grabbed by stimuli, or is it something we actively direct?
That's the core issue James raised. Is attention effect or cause? The book argues strongly for attention as cause. Our focused mind can be as powerful as a loud noise in shaping brain activity.
Like priming the visual cortex just by deciding to pay attention to a certain spot.
Exactly. That's top-down control from the prefrontal cortex, or increased blood flow in the touch cortex when you focus on a sensation. Learning anything new, like piano, requires intense focus initially before it becomes automatic.
So how does quantum physics potentially explain how attention does this?
Well, Stapp uses concepts like the quantum Zeno effect. The idea is that repeated observation or focused attention can hold a specific brain state in place, preventing it from dissolving back into quantum uncertainty.
Uncertainty like neurotransmitter release at the synapse, that's probabilistic.
Right. At the synapse, there's a cloud of possibilities for whether neurotransmitters release or not. Focused attention, via the quantum Zeno effect, might repeatedly ask the question in a way that stabilizes the desired outcome, like strengthening a specific connection.
So attention biases the probabilities, makes the desired connection more likely to fire and wire.
That's the gist of Stapp's model. It offers a potential physical mechanism, grounded in quantum mechanics, for how willful attention can exert real causal influence on the brain's physical structure and function. A possible way out of the mind-body problem.
So, wrapping up, the brain is physical, shaped by genes and experience. But it's not fixed.
Not at all. It's plastic, constantly changing. Mutable as a map of congressional districts, as the book says. Our lives sculpt our brains.
And the crucial addition here is our own active role. Our choices, our focus, our will, they are part of that sculpting process through directed mental force.
Echoing William James again. Focused attention is that fundamental act of will, that spiritual force that can shape brain activity. It's not an illusion. It's central to who we are and how we change.
So to recap this deep dive, we've seen the brain is incredibly plastic. The mind, especially attention and will, has power to shape it, challenging older behaviorist and purely materialist views. And quantum physics might offer a new lens on this whole mind-brain puzzle.
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing story. Our understanding keeps evolving. But the core message about our ability to influence our own brains is pretty powerful.
Which really leaves you, the listener, with something to think about. If you can direct your attention to intentionally reshape your brain circuits, what does that mean for you? For personal growth, overcoming challenges, maybe changing habits you don't like? What good habits, what skills, what ways of thinking might you choose to consciously hardwire using that power of focused attention?
It's a fascinating question to reflect on how these ideas might apply in your own life. Definitely food for thought.